Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshinim Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Fullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Vridaduhe Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So before we get started, just a quick note. Just last week, I think for the first time, we faced the Zoom issue where we had to log off. So just wanted to remind you that in case you face a problem with Zoom, please just disconnect and join back, and it should work. So hopefully it will be fine today, and hope my camera also doesn't freeze. So we are on the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and now we are actually moving on to the topic of Karma Yoga. As we saw last time, we started with the shloka Karmanyevadhikaraste. We'll be elaborating that a little more today. And today I have planned something a little different. I brought in some kind of an actual examples of Karma Yoga as we see in the day-to-day world, in today's world. So we might have a little bit of a dialogue on how you see the elements of Karmanyevadhikaraste reflected in these examples. So we will see how it goes. So with the reflection time today, I've just taken a few more points from our Vedas, and let us see the questions. We talked about last time as part of reflection as to what are Vedas and what are the four different Vedas. But the question here today is, when you look at that entire body of Vedas, which is not just we look at it as a scriptural text, but it is also something for us where we can find all kinds of information about how to really live our life. Now, when we talk about life, the question here is, how would we define Vedas into two major divisions? Can somebody tell me what are the two major divisions of Vedas?
Purva Mamsa and Uttara Mamsa.
Exactly. You got it, Amma. You got it. Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa. Purva meaning the earlier part, and
Rituals.
Uttara being rituals, and exactly. So, which brings to the second question. What is the other word for Uttara Mimamsa? Since we are saying this is a later half of the Vedas, but not necessarily later in the sense of that it is the second half or something like that, but in the sense of the higher values of Vedas. That's what we're talking about here.
Is it Vedanta?
It is Vedanta. You're right. Vedanta or Upanishads. So Mimamsa in general, the word Mimamsa means inquiry, or I want to say reflection, but inquiry is a better word. Mimamsa means inquiry. So Vedanta or Upanishads, the Uttara Mimamsa refers to Vedanta or Upanishads. Very good. Okay, now since we're doing shloka number 47, I just wanted to, see what did you understand out of the shloka 46? If you remember, we had 43, 42, 43, 44 was one series, and then 45 was about the Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha, where we talked about Vedas being addressing the gunas, the three gunas. But in shloka 46, which was an extension of, not an extension, it is actually puts in perspective of what Vedas say. And then shloka 46, we had this analogy of the pot of water and the flood of water. So my question is, what do they represent? And how does it tie to the gunas part of it, which we talked in 42 to 45? Any thoughts?
When you're satisfied, you don't want like materialistic things, like as pot like is limited, and like where flood is like unlimited.
Very good. Yeah, that is one aspect of it. You got one part of it, Anita.
Is the other one, when you have higher knowledge, then you really don't need the sansaric or lower knowledge. It automatically, you won't gravitate towards that because you got the higher knowledge.
Yes, that is another aspect. One more. Okay, so let me say that then. So you're right, pot of water represents the small pleasures we seek in the material world, whereas the flood of water represents the infinite joy, which is our own nature. So this is the shloka which, so this was the analogy we gave, the pot of water comparing to the flood of water, indicating that when there is a flood of water, why would somebody go and all the way to a well to get a little bit of water when he's surrounded by water everywhere? And the purpose of this analogy was this shloka where he says that a person who is already so well, who has found the joy within himself, that is that brahmanasya vijanataha, that knower of Brahman who recognizes that his own nature is at such ananda, for such a person, the Vedas is not even needed, because the way he's way above the Vedas. He is crossed the three gunas, and the Vedas is here compared to that small reservoir of water. And the small reservoir of water is enough to give, just like how we seek these small pleasures of water, small pleasures and joys in the world outside. So the Vedas are essentially giving us a path of evolution where we can, it gives us a way of basically exhausting our need for these joys, giving us a path, and then later we can actually move on to the higher happiness, which is nothing but our own nature. But so that's the whole idea which was given by him. Okay, so we were looking at the shloka Karmanye Vadikaraste Ma Phaleshu Kadachana. Very beautiful shloka, and it is basically it's a topic of Karma Yoga which is being talked about. And we saw this was introduced as Buddhi Yoga first. And essentially, Buddhi Yoga or Karma Yoga is really nothing but Karma. Buddhi Yoga is nothing but Karma Yoga, which he said. And what is Karma Yoga? It's basically the idea of doing your job or functions in the world outside in such a way that you're actually fulfilling your own dharma or duties. That is really what we talked about here. And by doing so, it is really, we are giving ourselves the freedom to express our own talents in the world outside. And the idea is, the focus is on the expression of the talent. The idea is not about what I can get out of the, or out of whatever action I'm doing. Because if I'm really looking for something outside for which I'm doing an action, then I'm really no different than a laborer. What do we mean by no different than a laborer? Basically, it is, I'm doing it only for the sake of earning my daily wages. So that's how you look at a person who's a laborer. Whereas the shloka is really pushing us to look at how we are really acting in this world. So this is where we are going to spend a little time with some examples I have. So the philosophy behind Karma Yoga, like we talked about, is basically the Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, or the single-pointed focus that I can develop through this aspect of Karma Yoga. And the shloka that we are going to see is probably the most known, most oft-repeated shloka, quoted shloka in the Gita. And many of the chapters of Bhagavad Gita actually goes deeper and deeper into this meaning. And in third chapter, we are going to be looking at it much more carefully. But given the sort of richness of the shloka, we are going to be looking at this with some practical examples. So, Karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala hetur bhuhu mate sangostva karmani. Because last time we didn't have a chance to go through it with some more details on the practical aspect of it. I'm going through it again. I might be repeating some of the points that I said last time, but bear with me. This is only for the sake of bringing out greater clarity of the shloka. So, karmani eva adhikarahate, indicating this adhikara word, which indicates the eligibility or the right or responsibility, if you will, is what is being talked about. So each one of us, we have the ability or responsibility or the right on how we perform the action. But we do not have a right, or we do not have even a need to be concerned about how the result is going to come out. And the third point here, which says that ma karma phala hetur bhuhu, indicating do not be the person who is the karma phala hetur bhuhu. Don't be the kind of karma phala hetur is almost an adjective which is given as the reason for karma phala. That is that person who's acting only when there is something in it for that person. What is in it for me? That when the person acts with that intention of karma phala hetur, or what is in it for me, such a person is called as karma phala hetur bhuhu, the person who acts with that motive. And at the same time, the shloka is saying that if for whatever reason you think that, well, I'm not acting for the sake of, why should I, or if you're telling me that I should not be concerned about fruits of action, then you know what, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit and do nothing. So the shloka is trying to say, no, you should continue to do it and never allow yourself to be motivated or by inaction. That is, let not your motivation be laziness. So that's the whole idea here. So this, if you look at it, breaks down into 4 things that emerges out of the shloka. So a true karma yogi, as far as this shloka is said, is one who then is concerned only with the aspect of action. And such a person, she or he, really has no concern with any results coming out of the action. And such a person does not work for a specific result. That is, whatever action, whatever the person is doing as an action is not geared towards absolutely insistence on a particular result. That doesn't mean that that person does not have a goal to start with. Nothing can get started without having a particular goal. But then once the goal is made and it is kept in front, such a person focuses their attention only on the work. And such a person is also one who will not sit back and do nothing. So keeping this in mind is where some of my practical examples are going to come now. So let us take the very first one, which is a karma yogi is one who is concerned with only her or his action. Karmanye eva adhikaraha aste. So when we perform our actions, when we are focused only on the fact that I am going to do an action where I'm exercising the skill that I have, then automatically things come searching for you. So for example, if as a chemist, I have retired and I'm staying at home, it is amazing that because of the fact that I had contributed to the field of chemistry or anything, I see that there are people who are approaching me in some form or the other, maybe because of the patents that I had filed or papers that I had written, where automatically there's people who can call me to find out if I can consult with them in the field of chemistry for which I had done this. So this is to say that when I take up a particular skill and I try to do and be the best of what I can, then I don't have to worry about whether I'll get future opportunities. I still remember one very nice example given by Oprah Winfrey in one of the interviews. When she was very young, she was very good. She was a very good student. So in this interview, she made a mention about the fact that when she was even in the 5th grade, because she was so good, when she went to the 6th grade or something, the teachers were already looking forward to having her in the class because she had already done so well in her previous grades. So the idea is, when I'm concerned only on doing my action well, then I do not have to worry about what my future opportunities will be. Such opportunities will come searching by itself, and I don't have to be anxious or be concerned about how things are going to happen. So the next thing to think about is such a person, when has put all that energy into that action, such a person doesn't have to worry about how the result will come. And in this case, I want to give a couple of examples here. For example, let's take a very simple thing of, I know Detroit is not the place for catching a bus or a train or anything, but let's say you're trying to catch a bus and the bus happens to be on the other side of the street. So you run to catch this bus. But even in such a simple task, the outcome many times is not guaranteed. If you're able to catch the bus, great, that's wonderful. But then there are other potential things that can also happen. The bus may leave before I catch the bus, or maybe once I get on the board, I may not necessarily have the ticket or anything. Or it's possible that even as I was trying to cross the road, maybe there's a car which comes in front and I'm not able to cross, and the bus just leaves without me being on it. So this is to say that results can be so many. And if I'm so focused on the fact that I absolutely have to catch the bus, then the chances of that happening may or may not happen. But my focus should be on somehow trying to make sure that I plan how to catch the bus and try to do this. So this being said, I'm going to put now a few picture in a very picture form. I'm going to say a beautiful story here. And at the end of the story, I would like you to tell me, how does this tie with the shloka of Karmanyevadikaraste? Okay. So this is actually, there is a series called Mind Videos, and I happened to see this and I thought it was a very simple story, but it really addresses the shloka that we are talking about here. So this boy called Eric, we find that he dreamt of drawing from the childhood. But people around him kept convincing him that it was nonsense, that it was, there's nothing in drawing or being an artist. But that didn't keep him away from thinking about it. So when he grew up, he got a diploma and he even got a normal job, a normal desk job. However, he never abandoned his dream of becoming an artist. So he tried to fight for himself, fight this out for himself, but then tired of fighting with himself, then he bought an easel, paints, and then he started his first painting. The process captivated him so much, like I'm just reading it out here, but as you can see, but Eric, he starts to, take the easel, and then whenever he got any breaks at work, he would just start to, paint on the easel, and he would get totally absorbed into his paintings. So for some time, his co-workers didn't say anything. But then one day, one of his co-workers, they came up to him and he looked at the painting and he just laughed. And he said, "Are you doing this painting again? You think you've got this whole thing going on and that makes you a painter?" And, so Eric, holds on to his painting and he doesn't necessarily gives into these kind of taunts. So he just tells him, "If you knew how much work is invested in paintings, you would not say this." And Eric knows that because he was putting all his heart and soul on trying to just paint. He really didn't worry about what was going to happen after that. So then his co-worker Dan just laughed and said, "Work? Yes, I will draw a dozen of them. You want to bet?" Then Eric turned back to the painting and said without interest, "I'm not going to bet with you, Dan." So Dan then just leaves and says, "Well, You shall see. Clearly, Dan had something up his sleeve there. So 6 months passed. Eric was still working on his future masterpiece. Meanwhile, a large exhibition was expected in the city, and you can see Eric is working hard to make sure that he can present his canvas to the public. Finally, the day comes, and Eric, is ready to present his painting. He's also a little nervous because this is the first time that he's actually showing his one and only painting that he has spent all this time to present. And then as he puts up his painting, he wanders around and suddenly he sees his co-worker Dan right there. So Dan was standing by the wall where he had about many paintings, and Dan had his name all over written on each one of them. And he notices Eric and approaches him with laughter, and he says, well, here enters the artist, and you didn't believe me. And he tells him, well, I have produced 7 paintings during this time, and you see, you can only do just one. And after saying this, Dan goes back to his artwork, and then he welcomes the visitors and he proudly shows them his paintings. And Eric didn't know what to do. He thought maybe he really wasn't that talented. And he is a little depressed now. It feels like as if the life was falling apart for him. And a couple of hours go by, and Eric notices that Dan's paintings are well received and they're sold out. And Eric stands there alone by his painting. And at that moment, an old man approaches and he starts looking at the painting with obvious interest. Eric sighed. He thought, well, this is just another passerby who knows nothing about art and who would glance at his creation confused and move on to other paintings maybe. But he notices that the man was still standing and suddenly looked at his face, and Eric almost froze. Here was the most famous art critic of the country, and the man just looked at Eric and he says, "Is this your work?" Eric said, "Yes, it's mine." So the man smiled and said, "Then you are lucky. I want to buy it for my collection. Let's discuss the price. But I think we can agree on a few $100,000. So Eric just nodded silently, unable to believe his luck. Meanwhile, Dan there, just stood there looking at him with envy. That was his fate, and his work was sold to ordinary visitors for pennies, whereas Eric's one and only painting sold for like $200,000. So I want to open it up now to all of you and ask you, what aspect of this shloka karmanye vadikaraste do you see in this story?
Not expecting results.
Not expecting the results, exactly.
Yeah, Eric focused on his actions only as he was doing he really enjoyed that. He just focused on that aspect. Initially, at that point, he never thought about like what money you'll get out of it. So
exactly, he focused on his talent. It's or his burning passion, correct? Just he knew he wanted to do this. He didn't give up on it, and he spent all his time just doing this one thing. That's all he did, right? Anything more? So that's the so ultimately it is focus on the work at hand will reap huge benefits. And here we saw an example of something in the material world, but this has huge benefits. So this shloka, a lot of people might think there is this aspect of jnana yoga also built into this shloka, which you probably may or may not have heard this before, because everyone looks at the shloka as a karma, as about karma yoga part of it, because do your action, forget about the results, and you'll be happy. But the whole idea here is, when I'm able to put my heart and soul into my action and dedicate that action completely to God. So that aspect of dedication is, you can see it as an indirect way of saying that, not focusing on the results. So it says, ma phaleshu kadachana. In ma phaleshu kadachana, the aspect of my will is there, what my expectation is there. But indirectly it is saying also is, my focus then is not for myself, but I'm focusing it on that Lord, because of whom I'm able to do everything. So in that sense, that there is huge benefits, because now we are able to give up my own ego and focus on that absolute self. So I just thought I'll bring that aspect here as part of the Karmanyevadikaraste shloka here. So now let's look at so we covered 2 points of the shloka. Now let's look at this about a karma yogi is one who does not work for a specific result. So here also, just to say that when I'm looking for a particular result, or when I have an insistence that whatever I do should work in a certain way, then I'm giving myself up for my own likes and dislikes. I want the result to be only in a particular way. I like it that way, and I do not want it to be any other way. That means I have a dislike of something else. So in that sense, I am actually increasing my ability to, or increasing my likes and dislikes towards it. Now, what does that do? It just creates a kind of a bondage, right? So then I'm actually constantly looking for, or I'm attached to these kind of things, which increases my bondage. And by doing so, it makes me more bound to everything the way, only this works this way, then I'm happy. Otherwise, I'm not, I'm unhappy. So you see again how much this creates a lot of stress and anxiety. So that also needs to be avoided here. So in this regard, we may think about is, if I'm not motivated by the result, how will I know where I'm heading? These are, some of the questions that always comes up as far as karma yoga is concerned. I want my project to be executed on time. I want my team to be inspired by goal. I want progress in my career. How can I do all this if I'm not motivated by these results? So to answer these questions, let us look at what, Lord Krishna has said. What he's saying is, again, there is nothing wrong with aiming for a specific goal or even to be inspired. We need to set up a vision. We need to define a goal. We need to have a plan. All these things are absolute musts for any execution of work. We can only be motivated if we have such a goal. But what he's asking is not to be motivated by the outcome of the goal. Have the goal as a motivation, but not the outcome. So that is the aspect which he's saying. So another doubt that may sometimes can come is, if I know that I'm only partially responsible for the outcome, then why should I even do any action? I can just quit my job and I can just sit at home and do nothing. So Lord Krishna again here cautions us not to do this. And he says, and we'll come to that aspect again, where he says, do not get, attached to inaction, because if I know that what is my swadharma, and I know that I have to perform that to the best of my ability, then somehow I should try to do that and not give up my ability to be there for any action. So this is the aspect I want to show another thing about, another practical story here. And again, I'm going to ask you also how you see that related to the shloka of Karmanyevadikaraste. So this is this aspect of the last point in the shloka which says, he does not sit back doing nothing, or, not subject himself to any inaction. So this is again another story that I came across, and I thought when I saw this small video, which is again one of these mind videos, I thought they were so relevant to the shloka here. So this is a story about a guy named Dale. He's a very hard worker in his firm. He has worked for about 12 years, and he is now fired. And his boss comes to him and he's very sorry about it. And he says, he's really unhappy to let him go, but well, business is bad and there's nothing he can do about it. So you see now, Dale comes back home, and the very first day after he's being laid off, he gets up his usual time and he has his coffee, and then suddenly he realizes that he's not going to work today. So then he looks up, his the wanted ads and everything, and finds really nothing interesting that day. So then he decides he's going to go and wash his dishes, and then he notices that, all these years when he's been working, there are some things in the house which wasn't taken care of. So he sees that his sink was clogging up, and he starts to, he takes out his tools and takes apart the sink, and then he cleans up the pipes. And then while he's doing that, he notices that while he was removing the blockage, it got really messy in this kitchen. And then he cleans up the kitchen, and then he, takes up all the trash. And as he's going down, he sees his neighbor, and his neighbor is very surprised to see him. What are you doing here at this time of the day? So then Dale explains about, his being fired. And then he says about, being sad about the fact that, he works so hard without any vacation, and now there's no work. And then he says, he thought about resting, but then his pipe got clogged. And then he remembered that his dad has taught him all these tricks of the trade. And so he was able to repair his sink. So his neighbor hears that, and she tells him, well, you know what, even I have a problem in my sink. Can you look at it? So he goes and he finds that he was able to fix it. Next thing, he gets a call to ask, does he know anything about electricity? And then he says, he tries to help for that. And pretty soon he gets, one call after the other, maybe to change a tap or to chandelier, and etc. So by the end of the week, he finds that he has so much of money and it was enough for life. He even considers starting his own small service, but he receives a call from the woman who was fixing the outlet, and she wants him to come and look at the store. And pretty soon he's so busy doing all these things. And then one day his boss sees him, and his boss thinks that, he's going to be sad and all that. But then he assures his boss that now he is earning a lot more than what he was had he been working in the same firm. So what aspect do you see from Karmanyevadikaraste in this small story here?
he doesn't get lazy. He is active, that in action, and sort of that makes him happy. He doesn't sit and move around.
Uh-huh.
And I think laziness is also removed. I mean, if you are lazy,
Right.
your thoughts are,
Mm-hmm.
what should I say, not positive. Your thoughts will be negative. So he overcomes all that by being active and keeping himself and doing his duty or doing service. He's also serving the people, no?
Right. He's saying that's true. That is true. Amma, you're really seeing a lot more than even what the story says. That's true. He's serving the people, and he was able to use his own skills. Yeah, an outlet for his skills, and he never allowed himself to go into inaction. That is exactly the point too here. Yeah, right away he was able to find something, and he was positive. And yeah, so you see this, I really like this too. So the message that was put in this one was, even if there's no work, you should not sit around. You can always apply your skills and abilities somewhere else. So that was the idea which is coming here. So you see, I mean, these two examples, it really drives home the point of the shloka. And I just thought, the shloka being such a powerful one, sometimes it can be misunderstood, especially for somebody who doesn't have that experience. When we are young and we are starting off, and if somebody were to read the shloka, they might say, wait a minute, the shloka is trying to say that I should not work for something. How can we do that? Whereas somebody who's very experienced, of being in the field working, and you understand that, you put this hard work and not everything really pans out the way you want, and you kind of reconcile to it, and you learn it through experience. But for a youngster coming out also, the shloka really gives through various ways to recognize that one should focus on the action and not on the outcome. So just wanted to present this that way. Any other thoughts or any other places where any of you can see the application of the shloka?
He also didn't take himself as the victim.
Beautiful, excellent. A very, very nice point, Anita, because going back to this point of inaction or laziness, one can easily sit down and say that, why me, correct?
Yes.
He didn't do that. Yeah. Nice. So again, going back to one other point about this shloka is, why should I perform without desire? Because that is the aspect which is also in the shloka, which is why should I perform without desire? Again, we talked about this aspect of likes and dislikes, which causes a bondage, karma bandhana. And the likes and dislikes automatically comes into play only when I have a certain desire. That is a desire for a certain outcome. And when I have that kind of desire, which is again a thought, to that extent, my mind is filled or clogged up, if you will, with these kind of thoughts. And when that happens, it is not free enough to think about the higher knowledge or jnana yoga. So for that reason too, it is important to, this ma phaleshu kadachana is such an important, to recognize that I'm not the producer of the result, there's somebody else. And once I do that, then that much, to that extent, the desire is much less. And when the desire is much less, then my purity of mind is much more. And when the purity of mind is there, then that becomes a reason for the, that helps, or that is the main idea, main reason behind which the highest knowledge can be got is only by having the purity of mind. So again, a couple more quotations. Last time I shared 2 other quotations, but here Mark Twain is one of my favorites. And he had this beautiful shloka which says, again, going back to this aspect of inaction, mate sangaha astu akarmani. That aspect is, don't just sit there and worry, be proactive. His thing is be proactive, do something, anything about what's worrying you so you can gain information, focus, and control over the situation. And he gives this, I've suffered a great many catastrophes in my life. Most of them never happened. So again, bringing this aspect of how we tend to worry or anxious about the results, and or even before we started getting anxious, but he talks about how I've suffered great many catastrophes which never really happened. Again, the focus is to focus in the present and putting our action on the present. They say another one is, if you have a dream, don't just sit there, gather courage to believe that you can succeed and leave no stone unturned to make it a reality. Again, this aspect of inaction. And I think I shared this last time, but again, very important. Let us not worry about the recognition, aspect of recognition or reward, but let us be more anxious for the quality of our work. So now you can see that in this shloka, karmanye vadikaraste, as much as it is about karma yoga and the aspect of the fact that karma yoga really is not a direct means for liberation. So karma yoga is an indirect means of liberation. What it does is that it leads to the purification of the mind and not to the perception of the reality. Perception of the reality, or this aspect of jnana yoga. So the realization of truth is brought about by discrimination and not in the least by 10 millions of acts. So I just wanted to throw this out also because this is a very important shloka from Viveka Chudamani, which addresses the aspect of how karma yoga leads to purity of mind. And one can be doing a lot of karma yoga, but yet if it doesn't lead to the purity of mind, and if the purity of mind does not lead it to realization of truth, any amount of acts is not enough, is no good. That's what here this is saying. So chittasya shuddhe karma na tu vastu upalabhyate vastu siddhi vicharena na kinchit karma kotibihi. Na kinchit karma kotibihi. So this is the aspect what I wanted to mention. So then this brings to the next shloka, which is also a very, very nice, very beautiful shloka, very important from the aspect of karma yoga here. I'll chant it. Yogastha kuru karmani. Yogastha kuru karmani. Sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. Sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. Siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva. Siddha siddhyo samo bhutva. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam yoga uchyate. So let's look at the meaning. Yoga staha kuru karmani. Staha meaning being steadfast, being firm. So be steadfast in yoga, yogastaha, kuru karmani. So being steadfast in yoga by performing actions. Sangam tyaktva, tyaktva, give up. Sangam, any attachment. And here Lord Krishna lovingly addresses Arjuna by the word Dhananjaya, Dhananjaya, or, master of wealth, so to speak. Siddha Siddhyo, that is Siddha and Asiddha. So in success and in not success, Asiddha, which is failure, whether it's both, remain always equipoised or balanced. Samaha, samaha being balanced, be bhutva, be always balanced in success or failure. And this aspect of being balanced is called as yoga. So samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam, evenness of mind. That evenness is called as yoga. So be in that evenness of mind while you're performing actions without attachment, O Dhananjaya. So this will allow you to be balanced in success and in failures. So yogastu samatvam, that is, once you understand what karma yoga is, you have a clear idea of what karma yoga is, that you're not seeking results. So then when you're not seeking that aspect of the outcome of the results, you're free. You're totally free now. Now, many times we think freedom is, the ability to do whatever I want. But here, the freedom is really when I don't have to, when I'm freed for looking at the outcome of the results. So that is what he's trying to show here. And when I'm free of that outcome, automatically my mind is completely in balance. It's totally in equilibrium because it is not really, looking for something and then being disappointed. If I get something, I'm very excited. Or if I don't get something, I'm very disappointed. So it doesn't have to go through those ups and downs, and it is completely balanced in whatever it is doing. So this is another beautiful shloka which trying to say that how I should act in this world and how I don't have to worry about the results because I am already so calm without it. And we'll just chant another one, and we'll take these two shlokas again with some more practical examples because they go together. And I see that we're already at 9:23 here. Durena hyavaram karma, Durena hyavaram karma, Buddhi yoga dhananjaya, Buddhi yoga dhananjaya, Buddhau sharanaman vichha, Buddhau sharanaman vichha, Kripana phala hetavaha, Kripana phala hetavaha. So this is now, this shloka is comparing a karma yogi to a person who is doing regular karmas, or you can say a karma yogi, So compared to what we just discussed as karma yoga, durena hi avaram karma. Avaram indicating inferior. So the actions which are done by looking at the outcome, those kind of karmas are highly inferior. And in fact, they're so inferior, there is a far, far inferior. That's what he's trying to say. Durena hi avaram karma, buddhi yoga dhananjaya. So for far lower is the physical action than yoking it to the intellect, than the karma yoga that we just talked. Therefore, Lord Krishna is saying, is telling Dhananjaya, so seek refuge in the intellect. So always be yoked to your intellect. Do not allow your mind to take over. Make sure your intellect is always there to guide you. Kripanaha phalahetavaha. Kripanaha phalahetavaha. Indicating Kripanaha indicating that those people who are looking at actions of what is in it for me, such people are Kripanaha. Kripanaha meaning wretched, are people who need to be pitied. So you see how the comparison of the two shlokas are. So we will see both of them again in light of this part, which is Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. We'll discuss a little more on why he's saying about Samatvam Yoga Uchyate and how this is another definition of yoga. And in fact, we'll be looking at this also. I didn't put the 50th shloka where you have yoga karma sukaushalam. There is another yoga word which is coming up. So we will look at all these three shlokas together next week. And we'll take up one or two questions also, which was put forth last week, which I wanted to do it today, but I ran out of time, but I will do it next week as well. So we'll stop here. Sarve bhavantu sukinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Om purnamadav purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.